Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International as we're getting ready for our NA versus EU matchup between Method NA and the Depleto squad. And of course, if you'd like to support the prize pool at the end of the year for BlizzCon, be sure to check out some awesome toys in the Transmorpher Beacon or Horde or Alliance fireworks, as they do contribute to that big grand prize at BlizzCon. I'm Jack, and joining me for our next series, we've got Sloot, Nagura, and Mr. Zyronic. And friends, we've seen a little bit of the Depleto squad, as you mentioned before, Nagura, onto this one. As Ironic, we're looking for Method NA to finish their points, make sure they're getting the top seeding that they're going to be wanting to. While they've already qualified for BlizzCon on their own, there's still going to be a lot on the line to make sure they get the highest seeding possible for BlizzCon here.
Yeah, I think honestly, like, Method NA I feel like they're kind of angry right now because that was their worst. Last West Cup was their worst finish ever. They always kind of got mean for getting second place all the time, but getting third place right after they won spring finals.
It wasn't a horrible performance, and I think it was more of like an abracadabra stepping up, but there's still that performance issue at hand of like, oh, they just won, and they really want to make sure they're the top team no matter what. So a lot of faith in Twitch chat being put on a Method NA as we're getting ourselves ready to go here in the Motherlode.
Really ecstatic to see that Twitch chat managed to add up to 100% this time. Probably the most exciting thing here. Method NA, and actually, I was about to say both teams stealthing right off the bat. Shakib having a little oopsie-daisy on the side early on. So early death coming in from him. Not sure if that was on purpose. I would assume that was not on purpose. Depleto squad doing a more untraditional route, I would say, Nagura already, as they pull a lot of the trash at the very front of the dungeon. Bit of a new team coming in here, so we'll see exactly what they do. But Shakib in a bit of trouble right now. He has to release and death run over, hopefully within the 100-yard range of the mass res that JB will be able to pull off. So rocky start here already for Method NA.
More like Shakib drunk, am I right?
Whoa!
As the Depleto squad already onto their next pull, you can see they also held onto their Bloodlust, which is something we don't usually see in Motherlode. Most of the time, teams just do a huge pull from the get-go, commit their Bloodlust, and then they'll just do 10 minutes of trash until they get it back up for the first boss. So the Depleto squad probably, doing a different or a bigger pull later on where they save their Bloodlust for. One thing to notice, well, that Shaya, their DK, usually plays Demon Hunter. He's a pretty big Demon Hunter main on live servers. He also played it a lot in the spring season, but this time around, not pulling out that Havoc. I don't believe we even saw a Havoc at all in the summer season, so that's something we might see from Shai in the future.
Yeah, no, we certainly haven't. The problem is the teams are just so concentrated around physical damage that even the 5% magic debuff is just not worth with the amount of crowd control and utility that the Rogues and Windwalkers already bring. Granted, there is some good crowd control that Demon Hunter does bring too, but that's a fantasy world that we don't live in, as Method NA is halfway through their Bloodlust here. Pretty substantial vote. Managed to recover a bit from their little oopsie-daisy early on with Shakib. He has managed to get back in the group on his Windwalker, on his Unholy DK here. Bit of a trouble here, though, from Depleto squad right now. We've already had Naladra pop cheat death right now. JB has gone down as well, had to release, immediately gets back in the fray of things, though. Pops stealth and just dashes in kitty form right back over to the group as the rest of the team tries to stay alive. Depleto squad already at 15% trash on the board. Bit shaky for a second there. We had some defensives pop out. We already had a cheat death proc, but no deaths for them as a bunch of Peacekeepers rain on their parade.
Yeah, those are some very difficult pulls. We all know that Motherlode is one of those dungeons that just has this nasty trash in the first place. But if you get any sort of affixes that make it even worse, like Bolstering or Sanguine, this time around, thankfully we don't, but we have the Raging affix. So Raging affix making all of this so much more difficult with when you have the thugs just all raging at the same time, on top of having the Raging buff that they cast as well. And we have Soothe on the rest of Druids, but it does have a 10-second cooldown, so you can't dispel all of them at the same time.
And not just that, but ridiculous as it may sound, spending that GCD just for a Soothe on an ad when the rest of your team is getting chunked almost one-shot is the last thing you want to do as a healer sometimes, unless absolutely necessary. And what Nagura said is not even just the Inhale Vapors on the thugs. You got the mech jockeys that are hitting random melee around the area with their shots as well. You have just spritzers going off left and right from the vendors. It is a crazy amount of splash damage on this trash that hits the rest of the group at 100% increased damage once they get that raging territory of sub 30%. So, and then just to make it all worse, you have Grievous taking everybody down as well. So a lot of damage here on Method NA right now as we get the Tranquility out of JB. Too little too late as Shakib goes down for the third time this dungeon. They do commit the battle res this time. They won't have that available again for about 6 minutes or so. So a lot of struggles here for Method NA early on. Depleto squad still having a flawless run as far as deaths are concerned, sitting at 0 at the board and 23% trash.
Yeah, we just saw one of the assassins actually not getting interrupted on the poison. So once the poison does go through, it will have a buff on the mob, on the assassin, and any sort of melee attack and Defend of Knives that it gets casted as well will apply the poison debuff to everybody. So we saw the poison go through, and we also saw Defend of Knives not being interrupted. Maybe it has something to do with their lineup, as they don't have the 2 rogues. 2 rogues definitely allow a lot more control, not because they have more interrupts, but because they have more single target stuns. So you can stun almost all of those mobs except the Peacekeepers, and then if you don't have an interrupt ready, you can just use a stun instead to be able to interrupt one of those spritzers or one of the deadly poisons. So Method NA having a little bit less control compared to the double rogue composition from Depleto squad.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, there's a fair bit of crowd control you could still get to interrupt those. I mean, even Shakib, he could have spec'd into Asphyxiate. He could have his grip on a 25-second cooldown, if I'm not mistaken, for Unholy. You know, Lighty has Paralyze, has Bumps, but certainly not as much as a Rogue. And, I mean, I do think it's a bit of lapse in play here for the team. There weren't that many mobs there, so just a bit of struggle here early on for Method NA. They seem to be recovering decently, though, as they actually surpassed Depleto squad in Trash after Depleto squad just had their first death here on Gigabob, who has now released an opts to run back rather than using the battle reds, which they do have available from Chaya as well on that Unholy DK. So 42% trash here for 44, excuse me, now for Depleto, whilst Method NA sits at 45%, but they do have the extra 3 deaths. So already Method NA are on the back foot, needing to basically overcome this dungeon by at least 15 seconds over Depleto squad in order to win from this point on.
Yeah, Gigabob unfortunately did get one-shot by one of those thugs with the charge. I believe it was just either raging plus the effect of the cast as well. So just double raging on the mob, straight up one-shot, very unfortunate. Maybe didn't have any suit abilities ready, or maybe dispelled another mob as there were multiple of them up. As Gigabob ran back, they actually he did get in combat with one of the Void emissaries, but he did have Shadow Melt available, so he was able to just de-aggro that one as they're back into the next pool.
He was able to avoid it, is what you're saying, Nagura?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Bit of an almost unfortunate circumstance there for Chaya, who actually got charged by one of the Inhaled Vapor thugs that stunned him. I actually did it right now on the screen as well, but he got stunned in one of the swirlies from the mobs. Actually almost one-shot him, taking him down to about 25%. Nary is taking a bit of damage as well. Doesn't have cheat death available. In fact, none of these rogues have cheat death available. And every time we mention this, we give them the caster curse that one of the rogues ends up dying, because we always mention they don't have the cheat death available. So hopefully that doesn't happen for the Depleto squad there. Yoda indeed does have his cheat death available on the side of Method NA, which is looking quite solid right now, starting to get back on their feet. Still with the 4 deaths though, but they're sitting at 50% trash. Depleto squad really not letting up. Really impressed to see the Depleto squad actually. They're performing quite well. They're keeping toe-to-toe with Method NA right now, who we know is just kind of a veteran here at the MDI. You know, it's their first time out of the gates, Depleto squad, and they've only had 1 death on the board. This is a pretty dangerous pull coming in right now though, as Rad moves out of all of the AoE from these Peacekeepers, which do start to enrage now. I'm not seeing a single Soothe come up for these enraged Peacekeepers, and Rad has seen this as well, and he says, nope, I'm getting right out of here. Heroic leaps out of the group, which unfortunately is going to leave the rest of the group quite vulnerable with a lot of the shots and AoEs coming down, so they have to be careful here with all the raging going out.
Yeah, they're doing really well, as you can see. I mean, maybe I reverse caster curse them, as I said before the game.
Caster bless.
Caster bless. As I said, we shouldn't expect too much from them because they're completely new, right? And now they're just doing really well. So caster blast coming out from me before the game even started. As Method NA, they're struggling, right? They don't have their battle rest. They don't have any battle rests ready. They have 4 deaths on the board, and they're behind in percentage compared to the Depleto squad. So they need to go a little bit faster from here on out if they want to beat the Depleto squad, as they seem to be very clean so far.
Yeah, you know, interesting. Actually, not really that interesting to see from both teams that they're doing, you know, kind of that typical strategy of getting around 80% trash done before the coin-operated crowd pummeler, the first boss of the dungeon. We did see last week, I believe, from No Girls Allowed, a kind of attempt at doing a different strategy, doing some of the trash in the R&D wing and some of the 4th boss's trash, and we were very quickly reminded as to why teams don't do that trash. So it seems that they'll be sticking to their guns here and just doing the 80% and likely high 90s% before Azarok, the second boss, as Depleto squad does another fairly substantial pull here right outside of a coin-operated crowd pummeler's room. Looks like Method NA is working on the same pull. Oh, no, they're not. They're just a bit on the side here. So both teams really kind of just waiting for their bloodlust to come up. But Nagura, we are in a fortified setting, and I doubt that they're going to commit their bloodlust to the boss, coin-operated crowd pummeler, especially with the damage increase on that boss. We do know how nasty the pull after the first boss can be, and some teams, for some reason, combine it with that Void Emissary as well. So I wouldn't be shocked to see one, maybe even both of these teams commit that bloodlust there.
Yeah, I really hope that neither of those teams just do the Void Emissary pull that we just kept talking about. It wiped so many teams the last time around. I'm not even completely sure if we will see a Void Emissary there, as it is arcane heavy this time around. So we'll see what happens for those teams later on. We did see something very interesting that some of the EU teams, I believe, pulled off the last time around, that they just have the rogues go into this pack with the Void Emissary, and as it does not social aggro, they just pulled all the mobs, they tricksted on top of the tank while they were fighting the first boss, and then they shut them out, or they vanished off the aggro from the Void Emissary, and then they just avoided it afterwards. So I think that was a very smart play. We'll see what the Depleto squad does here, as they did engage the boss. They do not have their bloodlust ready, so I'm not sure what they're saving it afterwards, but they decided to just pull the boss here.
Boss indeed down to 68% here for Depleto squad right now, pulling it out of those coin piles, making sure that the boss does not grab its magnet and get a 10% increasing stacking permanent buff for the rest of the fight. Want to get away from those coins as quickly as possible. Fronto coming in, team does well to move around as they kick the foot bombs into the boss, quite athletically might I add, as they click those keyboards. Shia down to 36% says nope, and pops Death Pact, wanting to make sure to not have any risk and any stress for Gigabob, that is struggling just a bit to heal through the Grievous stacks here, making sure that everybody gets healthily above 90% so we can get rid of that really nasty Grievous damage over time effect. Should keep chunking a bit here on the side of Mythic Dungeon, who now is on the boss as well, down to 60%. They're about 6% trash ahead of Depleto squad, however they're slightly behind on the boss, so this is looking fairly equivalent in terms of raw progression through the dungeon, but we'll keep coming back to the same theme with how neck and neck the teams are right now. 3 extra deaths for Mythic Dungeon is going to be a big thing to overcome.
I really like what Mythic Dungeon did here. This is something we've seen way back in the spring season, I believe in the very first or second cup, where Mythic EU was playing DK in Metaload, and they were pulling a lot of those neutral mobs on the side on top of the crowd pummeler, just so the DK gets more faster might stacks. The more mobs there are around, the more strength you get, and the more single target damage you do, of course, because of the strength buff. So that's something that Mythic Dungeon just pulled off. Did pull all of those neutral mobs on top. That's why Shakib is doing so much damage, as you can see on the damage meters there in the top left corner. Depleto squad, they're done now, so let's see what they pull off here with this trash.
Yeah, looks like straight into action. Rad Heroic leaps in. Looks like just a shy 2. Don't make that 3 packs. There are those Earth Shapers in there. Those are particularly dangerous, as they not only have the Earth Shield, not the biggest deal in the world for an interrupt, but you want to make sure those Rock Lances get interrupted. Those absolutely decimate tanks, not only in this fortified environment, but should any raging sub 30% ones get off, that's an easy 2-shot on a tank. It puts a nasty damage over time effect on you as well. So team doing really well to crowd control here. Naladra getting just a couple of hits on the side there. Depleto squad finishes this pack off quite well, and they get ready to move on. Mythic Dungeon looking to match suit right now as they pull a fairly big pack. Actually, the same 3 packs. I don't know if they got the patrol in there as well, but once again, danger here for Mythic Dungeon. Tranquility's already been popped here from JB, so perhaps a bit early on as the groups start enraging now. Lady getting chunked quite low. We'll have to keep an eye on it, but Nerf Tank and frankly anybody in the group can get quite split-second damage any second.
And we see the Depleto squad struggling a little bit here. The Prod Warrior almost going down. They did manage to recover now, so they only have to finish up a bunch of those Earth Shapers. The Earth Shapers, of course, need to be interrupted quite a lot. Not only do they cast an Earthen Shield, which is not nice if it goes through, just because it costs you a little bit of a time efficiency. And then on top of that, you also have the Rock Lances, which do an insane amount of damage, so those need to be prioritized. You want to make sure you interrupt all of them so your tank does not go down. Mythic Dungeon catching up now. They did manage to clear this trash a lot faster than the Depleto squad did. They're already on to the next boss, 94% trash. You see, they might just pull some trash on top of Astrok at the very end to be able to get the last 6%. That's something we've seen Mythic Dungeon do a lot. And now they did use their Bloodlust here for Astrok.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I know Mythic Dungeon, at least in the previous season, was a big fan of using grabbing Taskmaster Ascari and the 6 mobs surrounding him on top of Azarok to complete their 100%. So I think they're going to end up doing that rather than combining it with some of the R&D trash down the hill. But we'll have to see. Depleto squad here, 92%. Indeed, they did pull a bit slower. They decided to do 2 separate pulls for the trash pre-Azarok, whereas Mythic Dungeon did it all in one sweep. So they managed to get a fair bit ahead here and try to counter some of that 15-second deficit from the deaths loss that they had earlier. Azerok now 85%, excuse me, for Depleto squad, whilst 40% for Method NA. So Method NA starting to get to that point in the fight where they will need to start grabbing some of the trash if they want to efficiently cleave on top of it. JB has about 4 minutes left on his staff becoming available again to proc. You cannot build charges during that debuff, so just not going to have that available, but Giga is also wearing the staff and hasn't had a single proc yet during this dungeon, so something that might be a bit of a saving grace later on in the fight, perhaps even later on as a boss.
Yeah, so Depleto squad not actually committing their Bloodlust here compared to Method NA using it. So maybe Depleto squad wants to save it for the very last boss. Maybe Method NA thinks they're gonna get another one, but I very highly doubt it, as there's only 2 bosses left. I don't think they're gonna need 10 more minutes, especially not on a 45 setting, so I do believe Method NA just thinks that it's more efficient on this boss rather than the last boss. Depleto squad disagrees as they hold on to their Bloodlust. Now, Method NA did not do this pull that we've been talking about with pulling the trash on top. They rather just moved on, so we'll see where they get this last 6%.
But what they did pull was a mine into Yoda's face, who unfortunately proc cheat death on the way down. Silly squander there of a 6-minute cooldown. So it looks like they're actually just rushing through the trash. You know what they might do, Nagur? We've actually seen some teams do is they pull one of the mechanized robots on top of Rixa Fluxflame along with the mechanic nearby, and that might be the remaining 6% that they need. We could see it just that 2-pack or at least 3-pack in the distance there that JB's looking at right now from our observers on Method and A side. Shakib having a bit of struggle here, but does manage to get through relatively unscathed as JB indeed does pull the trash on top of Rixa here. Now, we're in a fortified environment, so this pull can get particularly spicy very quickly. So I want to make sure to interrupt that the technician, excuse me, on top of the bot here. Depleto squad following suit right now. They're still at 92%. I think they might do an R&D pull. They are 2% or were 2% behind trash for a Method in A, but looks like they're actually just going through and doing their skip.
Maybe they choose to pull even more trash on top of Rixa Fluxflame here, but yeah, definitely 8% is quite a lot that they're still missing. They do their skip as well here, their Shadow Melt skip, but they're pretty far behind. Now, there's a 3 death difference, but it's only 15 seconds, and Method NA is definitely further ahead than 15 seconds. So the Depleto squad needs to catch up quite a bit. One more thing is that they do have their Bloodlust ready. So, okay, they're actually using the Bloodlust here. So interesting to see that they used the Bloodlust with the War Machines and the trash being pulled on top. Seems like it's pretty efficient.
Seems like it's pretty efficient, but I don't think a War Machine and 1 Technician's 8% trash. I guess we'll see in a moment, right? Method NA is sitting at 96% right now, and their War Machine's still up. I do believe it gives about 3 to 4%, so I think Method NA is covered. Not sure about Depleto squad, who is just over halfway through their Bloodlust, getting Rixa rapidly down to 65% HP, and starting to close that gap a bit that Nagura just mentioned that Method NA were ahead on. So they are certainly still behind on the boss, about 25%, but they're looking to close that gap with the powerhouse that is Bloodlust for the entire team, which has now just worn off for Depleto squad. Half done with the War Machine on top of the group. Not too dangerous. It does pummel the tank fairly hard for substantial magic damage, which on top of it, Rixa does magic damage as well. Warrior's not the best tank equipped to deal with that, especially if it's not reflectable and you only have a 25-second cooldown on that, as we can see Rad getting chunked here. But as long as they get nice attention coming in from the healer and just rotate IP, ignore pain quite frequently, they should be good to go. War Machine's about to fall here in just a moment, and Method NA did indeed hit that 100% trash as Rix is about to die.
Yeah, this might actually be closer than we thought it is, as both of those teams are about to finish up Rixa Fluxflame. Now, one thing I wanted to mention earlier as they're fighting the previous boss, that the Depleto squad was actually pretty unlucky with the fixates from the Earthshapers, just because Shaya, the DK, had 2 fixates almost all of the time, and sometimes even 3 fixates. And Shaya, the DKs do not have this increased melee attack range like the Rogues do with the Outlaws back. So Shaya actually needed to kite the mobs quite a bit, sometimes not being able to melee attack. So they were losing quite a bit of damage because of those fixates here. But the Depleto squad on 98%, as you mentioned, not actually enough percent. So they need to pick up something else on their way to the last boss.
On their way to the last boss, or maybe combine it with the last boss, or they might hit some mines. But the problem is, if they don't combine it on top of the last boss, it will be an efficiency loss, because they're going to have to stop to do something else instead of directly going to the boss, just like Method NA did, who's now started on Mogul Razdunk, final boss of the dungeon. 83% left on him as they try to get to that transition phase at around 50-ish. Now I say 50-ish, of course, because of the boss's caught in one of the casts here, such as the Gatling gun that we just saw. He'll actually not stop it. He'll finish the cast, so you can get the boss well below 50% before actually transitioning. Now, in the early days of BFA, you could actually kill the boss entirely if you burst them down quickly enough. That just does not really exist these days anymore. So Mythic NA definitely will have to deal with this transition phase, no matter how much damage they might have, sub 50%. Depleto squad is all the way up on the platform as well as they wait for their skip to complete, and they're now at 99% trash, so it does look like they're picking off some of the mines in the lower area, but just a lot of time that they need to wait just for this to happen.
Yeah, this I'm not completely sure if this is going to be worth it for them. It's cost them quite a bit of time to do the skip here and get this last few trash percentages as well. It seemed pretty smart though, because somehow they did manage to pull one of those mobs alone without social aggroing anything else, or maybe even they probably shadow melted it off, something like that. They might have just zapped some of the mobs, pulled one, and shadow melted off the aggro from the rest of them. So seems like a smart pull to do. I'm not sure if worth. Because the setup time does, of course, cost you as well, so we'll see later on. On the other hand, Mythic NA, they're already in their intermission phase, so they're definitely about to be faster unless something does go wrong for them. Again, the 15 seconds difference is not going to make up for this. There's no more Bloodlust difference as well either, because they did use it on Rixa. So unless Mythic NA does have any sort of deaths here, it seems like they're going to be faster.
Yeah, this pathing and strategy was just legit inferior for Depleto squad compared to Mythic NA directly going to Vogel Razdunk, and it frankly might cost them the match. It certainly cost them the advantage they had with the 3-death difference from Mythic NA off the bat, but it was so much slower that, I mean, it's just going to throw the match unless Mythic NA somehow has a bit of a disaster here at the end. But this boss is pretty much in the bags for Mythic NA right now as it hits 20%. Will be falling here in just a moment. They've already gotten through the difficult part of the encounter with that transition. Right now, Mogul Razdunk only now about to hit transition for Depleto squad.
Pretty impressed by the Depleto squad still, though. I mean, this is way closer than I thought it would be. I thought it was just going to be Mythic NA, just, you know, charging through, just winning easily. But the Depleto squad coming in here and first play at all in this cup, and they're showing off. Like, they're doing a really good job here.
I mean, they're gonna have to show off a bit more with
yeah,
with that next. I'm already drooling at the mouth with the next map coming up between these two teams, Jack. But don't tell me you're not excited.
Oh, I'm incredibly excited on that one. So Mythic NA, as the timer does tick down, they do take game number 1, and after a pretty rocky start onto that one, it's ironic. It didn't seem like for some of the pulls that we've gone to. Previously, Fortified, Raging, very scary going into this one. They also had to kind of adjust some of their pulls, too, to make up for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally just a rocky start, like you mentioned. They had 2 deaths at the start with a missed Shroud, and then like an on-purpose death because they had to get a res off on Shakib because he missed the Shroud. And then a couple extra spot deaths and trash pulls that were not too big of a deal. Battle res for one, after combat res for the other. After that, though, it was like smooth sailing. They had very clean pulls throughout the entire dungeon afterwards, and their time in the end was still pretty solid. I mean, Mythic NA, this wasn't exactly a perfect run because of the deaths, but what I like to see from the team is that, like you mentioned, they actually are changing their pulls and their routes based off of the affixes of the dungeon. In particular, this dungeon had Raging, so they had to really make sure that they kept an eye on what types of mobs they were pulling so that they could make sure they dealt with all the individual mechanics of the mobs perfectly.
You also saw in particular on the coin-operated crowd pummeler, they started pulling some of those neutral mobs in so that they could start cranking up Shakib's damage, and it really started the momentum to start catching up into the series.
Yeah, I mean, just small little adaptations like that, a little bit of extra trash percentage, a little bit of extra damage for your rogue and your unholy DK. Small little advantages that they're gaining. Like to see that.
You'd love to be able to see it on that end. And we always kind of go over, okay, they had a really big pull here. They grabbed all these mobs there. But let's start talking about some of the specifics for how they're setting up some of these pulls with our MDT.
Yeah, like as casters, we tend to gloss over how big some of these pulls are, and we say, oh, that's really difficult. But I want to highlight this pull they made on the right side of the dungeon in MDT here. This doesn't look like that big of a pull. They've got 3 Peacekeepers, they've got 2 addled thugs, they've got 2 hired assassins. The real big danger in this dungeon right now that I'm looking at, because they're doing so much kiting around, they have 1 extra mech jockey that's going to be running around in circles, and whenever your tank is out of range of that mech jockey, they're going to cast Grease Gun. And if that mob is raging, it's going to one-shot your DPS. On top of that, the other thing to worry about, it's kind of a hidden mechanic in this fight, because people don't think about it. But the addled thugs, if they get their Inhale Vapors cast off, and they cast a clothesline, they also will one-shot with Raging. And you can see it takes 1 or 2 of these things going wrong in this pull as we roll the clip for just 1 DPS to go down, and that's how you see Shakib go down in this pull here.
Yeah, especially since we have to deal with the Raging affix, which the Druid's able to soothe, and that Inhale Vapors is another Enrage on top of it. You're keeping JB so busy.
It's extremely dangerous here in Crypopolis.
Is that what you're going to say, buddy?
I just wanted to add that in. I love this area.
That is the name of the location under that one. Very good.
I love this area. What could I say?
Yeah. Previously, we've seen Method NA start pulling some of those 3 or 4 adult thugs in particular, and it's so hard to avoid any of those deaths because you just don't know where it's going to go there.
Well, like we were mentioning, they had to completely change their pull. They couldn't do 3 or 4 adult thugs on Raging. They have to make sure that they're kicking all of the Inhale Vapors, not to mention they also have to deal with the normal interrupts that the Assassin and the Refreshment Vendor require. They just don't have enough kicks to deal with all of that on top of the Raging. They only have 1 Soothe with JB. So if they push too many of the thugs at the same time and they have Raging charges go off on DPS, someone's going to die.
It's a nightmare of ad management.
The fact that they only had 1 DPS go down on that pull with as much as they pulled is pretty impressive.
It is incredibly impressive, and they'll have to continue to impress us because the next dungeon is going to be Waycrest Manor with your chosen affixes. So don't go anywhere, guys. We got a great game coming up on the other side of this break. Method NA is up 1 against the Depleto squad as we're getting ready for our viewer-selected Depleto key, as we're getting ourselves ready for Waycrest Manor. You guys voted for it. You chose the affixes that we're going to go to. It's going to be Waycrest Manor with Bursting and Necrotic Salute. I love it.
I mean, me too, because I don't have to play it.
You had to play it last week.
That's true. That was awful. Nobody liked it at all. But yeah, I mean, this is just nasty. You know, usually you see even guys like Method EU, they usually tweet, very boasting of their dungeon times. They just get angry tweets being like, "Who made this affix? Why is this fortified? This is the worst thing you've ever done." Twitch and Twitter. So this is going to be a nasty one. I mean, there's going to be a bit of struggle busing going on here for sure.
There'll be some struggle busing. I always think it's kind of funny since we're able to have certain unique compositions of affixes, combinations of affixes. Thanks, buddy. Yeah! Since we're able to have some unique combinations of affixes onto this one, but this is actually just a legitimate week having Fortified Bursting Necrotic onto this one's ironic. And last time I went through Waycrest, it was horrifying how much bursting there was going on, and the Necrotic stacks up insanely quickly.
Yeah, there's just so many mobs in this dungeon. It's nasty.
Whoa! JV bringing in the Mistweaver onto this one, and we also have double Havoc coming in on both sides. Wow.
Can someone go check if the sky's still blue really quick? What is going on?
I guess they're good. I spoke too soon. Here's so 2 Havoc Demon Hunter, not even just 1. And then we have a Brewmaster. There's a Brewmaster coming in. No,
that's a Windwalker.
Oh, that's a Windwalker. I'm going insane. I was like, why are they running double?
It's like Mean Rogues.
I mean, I do need glasses, but I'm so.
You want mine?
I don't know what I'm more frazzled by here. Double Havoc Demon Hunters coming in, or JB not playing a Resto Druid right now?
I know. I mean, that's one of the things we've always seen him playing that Resto Druid. We've always seen that
on live, on practice, everything.
Yeah. I don't think we've actually, at least to my knowledge, it's ironic, I haven't seen him practicing Mistweaver since, like, beta.
I think that's the last time I've seen JB playing Mistweaver.
Yeah.
The Havoc Demon Hunter is interesting, though. I'm pretty sure Chaya, that's just what he plays online.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's Demon Chaya, and it's just, yeah.
Which is interesting because the Havoc Demon Hunter, it gives the magic damage debuff, like the 5% increased magic damage, which makes sense for Method NA since they have the Unholy Decay for all that extra magic damage, but it must just be a comfort pick for him.
It's got to be a comfort pick, something that they're going to be working through and the darkness, they have some better survivability onto that end, but it is surprising since you really would like to see that Unholy Decay take advantage of that bonus magic damage. But regardless, let's take it away in Waycrest Manor. Let's get into this one. I'm ready.
I mean, we were already kind of boasting about the affixes earlier, which are already so nasty with Bursting, Necrotic, and Fortified, but just complete weirdo. What is that purple road color? It's been so long since we've seen it. I mean, we saw it on the Vengeance earlier, but Chaya not shying away at all from damage right now, pumping into this first mob. Both of them right now heavy on this Void Emissary right away on the stairs as they all head up to the top left. Now, of course, we do know top left is consistently open in Waycrest Manor, as always, in order to keep everything equal between the teams. Mass Stealth coming up here for Method NA as they head over to the Triad right now. Depleto squad following suit as well.
Yeah, one more thing to note is that Rad on the Depleto squad side is not actually playing Night Elf. He's playing Dwarf. Probably something we missed on this screen when we saw everyone just playing Demon Hunter and Mistweaver and all those different colors all of a sudden. But yeah, Dwarf and not Night Elf, so no Shadow Belt available for the tank of the Depleto squad, meaning that whenever they do have some sort of skip, they need to rest their tank. Well, Nerf on the other side is playing that Night Elf, but Nerf does not have the ratio to get rid of the Necrotic stacks. That's the reason why they play the Dwarf on the Depleto squad side. Now, both of those teams actually go straight to the boss after finishing this first pack and use their Bloodlust as well.
And interesting to see that Shakib's actually holding on to his, as I said, that his meta goes off. He was holding on to his meta, but they actually combine it with some trash Chaya pulled it off right away as soon as they pulled the boss. Nerf having a bit of struggle here with the necrotic stacks, though, already reaching 22. Plus, he has the ticking aura buff from Sister Briar, so a lot of damage. Unfortunately, this is actually going to snowball into the healing reduction aura from Sister Selena, which reduces all healing by 50%. So they're going to need to get him nice and healthy before they start that phase. They're looking to finish her off quickly, and the trash as well before things get out of hand. Depleto squad here has already killed off to Sister Selena, and they're on Sister Milady, which is now at 25%. But they obviously played it a bit safer here. They didn't combine it with any trash, which is why they are 4% behind on that trash counter.
Okay, so the graphic actually lied to me earlier, and Nev is playing Dwarf as well. You just saw him use the Dwarf racial as he had so many necrotic stacks. So both of the tanks actually playing Dwarf just to have the availability to this racial to get rid of the necrotic in case something stacks really high. So both having this safety net, not going to be able to shadow melt off any sort of aggro, but we will see what they do later on. And you know what? I was thinking about the Demon Hunter a little bit and why they're really running this, and it might be because of the offensive dispel that they have, which is going to be useful later on when we see all of those soul fetishes come out. Maybe that's the reason why, and also, you know, maybe AoE stun as well into darkness as we can see him.
Yeah, Consume Magic is not bad. It's a 10-second defensive dispel cooldown, but I mean, I don't know, like to replace it for a rogue who could just help CC those interrupts from ever going off in the first place. I think that's just one of the side benefits. I think in the case of Shaya here, it's likely a comfort pick. We do know he likes to play Demon Hunter on live. I'm not sure on Shakib's story. Nerf unfortunately going down. On purpose, though. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It was planned, as he is not playing Night Elf. He can't Shadow Meld around the corner, so he just has to eat that death to the face. Depleto squad chewing through their trash right now as well, as they're about to hit about 13% here, 12%, as that final guard goes down just slightly above Method and A, who's gone around the corner. And I believe we'll be doing a pretty substantial pull. We are in a Void-heavy version of this dungeon for the week, meaning you're going to see a larger presence of Void-touched emissaries. You see one right now in the courtyard. Huge amounts of damage coming up from every member, but Lighty, starts to skyrocket ahead just because of that unholy prowess. Rad following suit and getting the purposeful death on their end as well. Not sure why Nala died, but he doesn't have his Shadow Meld available, so I guess that's why he had to. I'm not sure where he used it, though. Maybe
misclicked. I don't know. Definitely doesn't use it during the boss fight, right? So probably was just like a misuse of that Shadow Meld. Nerf dropping really low, actually going down here. They are on the end of the pull, though, so this should be fine.
This is where a lot of the danger comes in. Trust me, I know, because I've done this. I did these dungeons a million times with these awful affixes on live. A huge amount of danger comes in with the necrotic stack plus bursting. What happens is you start killing mobs off as the tank. You then have necrotic stacks on you. So the healer's trying to heal everybody up, and you're basically unhealable when you're at almost 44 stacks. So you just can't get healed through the bursting. So the bursting plus the dot of the necrotic just takes you down as a tank, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to be very wary and kite early to drop that before bursting. And it seemed to have caught Nerf off guard there, and he ate a death for it. But they didn't have to use their battle res, fortunately for them, as Depleto squad tries to chew through some more of this trash behind the fountain here. I believe their lineup, did they kill the Void Emissary or not? I don't see it pulsing, so, oh no, it's still pulsing, yeah. So they're actually opting to kill the trash before they move on to the Void Emissary. A bit safer version of Method and A's strat here.
And yeah, you also want to look out for the darkness cooldown. Now, the darkness is going to be a huge defensive city that you want to make use of with bursting. It's so good for bursting because you just finish off the trash, you stack it up, you can do those huge pulls, even go up to really high bursting stacks, and then you pop the darkness, make sure everyone stands in it, and then it's going to be so much easier for them to heal it away. But the Depleto squad is struggling as the tank goes down, Shaya goes down. Everyone has so many bursting stacks that do not have the darkness available to them, and the Void Emissary is still AoEing there in the back.
Yeah, the problem is, what I was pointing to as well, is the bright blue glow on those mobs means soul fetishes got off. There were 2 soul fetishes that got off. That's a 5 stack of 10% increased haste and damage per stack on these mobs. They are absolutely trucking in this fortified environment. It was too much to handle. They did manage to recover the pull for the most part, and Battle Res Rad, which is not going to be available again for 4.5 minutes or so. But that was dangerous, and I mean, now they're just in a situation where they have 2 extra deaths on the board versus Method and A, who's already working on Soulbound Goliath, combined with some trash.
Yeah, that was a beautiful observer view here. As we saw, Yoda, the rogue from Method and A, just pull away all the trash to the side with Repose, with Cloak and Tricks to the Trade, making sure that he pulls the Soulbound Goliath on top of Nerf. And then once the boss was passed, he ran away and vanished off the aggro. They did aggro Thornshaper and the Emissary though, which is fine, right? I'm not completely sure if it was if they wanted to have the Thorn Shaper. I definitely saw the grip on the Emissary, so they wanted the Emissary. Not sure if the Thorn Shaper was intended or not, but they did manage to kill it, so no problem here. One more thing to note about the Mistweaver here is that the spear that comes out from Soulbound Goliath is not actually dodgeable for a Mistweaver, because Resolute, they can shapeshift in and out of bear form or cat form or whichever form, and they're going to be immune to the thorns, while Mistweaver does not have something like that. So they definitely want to make sure that they don't drag Soulbound Goliath into a fire right after a thorns or right before, because if the healer is in thorns, he can't heal, and then the fire might just wipe the whole group.
Yeah, Depleto squad moving a fair bit kind of slower through everything here. They're pulling some of the trash. They have crowd controlled the Emissary of the Tides on the side. You can see the roots there. Giga just making sure every 8 seconds to keep that Emissary rooted so that they can have good interrupts on the Thorn Shaper and not have another boo-boo moment with the Soul Fetish going out from these Thorn Shapers. But, you know, they're kind of chewing through everything slower. I'm curious to see if they're also going to just pull Matron Brindle to the side and kind of deal with the Goliath by itself. Speaking of Goliath, 13% left on for Method NA on this boss right now as they cleave it down with the Thorn Shapers and the Thorn Guard as well. Soul Fetish does go off on one of the middle Thorn Shapers, making sure to interrupt the effigy reconstruction, else the Thorn Guard will pretty much get healed to full there, but no problem for them. They actually perfectly cleave everything down there at the end, and they get ready to go in Raw's Hall here.
Yeah, they do have the darkness available on Shakib's side, so maybe they are planning to do a pretty big pull and just use the darkness to be able to survive the bursting stacks. We'll see what we have here, as they also have Void Emissary in the corner. Void Emissaries, they just sometimes are really annoying, and you have to deal with them. You can't just avoid all of them, so that's why we see them just dealing with it here, making sure they just burst it down without getting too many of their AoEs off. You see Nerf not being able to tank anymore because of those necrotic stacks, and perfect usage of the Ring of Peace from JB. So very well used here to be able to get the Ring of Peace in the corner, making sure that none of the ads reach Nerf so he can reset the necrotic.
Yeah, and that Void ad particularly, most of the Void ads usually have some kind of line of sight component next to them. There are some really mean ones that don't, and you kind of have to either avoid them entirely or just kill them or be killed before your third take goes off, or 2 takes for some more undergeared members. But Method NA having no problem there with line of sighting that one as needed, and Nerf perfectly resetting those necrotic stacks and fishing off the trash here. Depleto squad has indeed started on Soulbound Goliath and has actually combined it with Matron Brindle, as we can see on the right side here, 83% left on that boss. A lot of damage coming in for Raz right now, who decides it's time for a necrotic reset, and Heroic leaps away from the boss, which fortunately for them moves rather slowly, so he's able to just kind of outrange the boss. No taunt gimmicks needed between them, but they did lose a bit of damage as the boss separated from Matron Brindle, which the rest of the team was just DPSing down, and then they came back to Soulbound Goliath. Nice cleave pull here for Method NA right now, dealing with the rest of these bursting stacks. Oh, Nerf just manages to get healed. That take would have killed him. Yeah. So he just gets that last take healed from JB as they prepare to move down the rest of the hall in a moment.
Yeah, so one more thing to note about Wakecrest Manor is that those maggots and all of those smaller mobs actually used to apply on death affixes. So they used to apply bursting in the past, but they changed it. So now the maggots do not apply bursting anymore, thankfully, because else these kind of pulls would be insanely difficult. They are already difficult, but on top of having all those fits, having the maggots apply bursting as well, it's just an insane amount of group damage. So thankfully they did change that, so they don't have to deal with that anymore. As Method NA actually moves on into this like hunter room where there's a bunch of marksmen that they have to deal with, they are pretty nasty if you don't get all the interrupts off, and that's something that Method NA wiped to in the past, so they definitely want to make sure they get all the interrupts out.
The Serpent Stings, yes, they're quite disastrous if you catch them if you don't interrupt them, rather. Nerf here, 21 stacks of Necrotic decides to head down the hall and play it safe after the almost disastrous situation that they narrowly avoided in the courtyard where he died to 44 stacks of Necrotic with that bursting taking at the end, but he goes right back into the fold here. Serpent Sting does get, or Severing Serpent rather, does get interrupted there from the survival as Depleto squad here looking to try and finally finish off Soulbound Goliath. Not the biggest efficiency here from Depleto squad. I mean, it was nice that they cleaved down Matron Brindle with the boss, but they didn't really combine anything else on top of it, so they just slowly single targeted it down, have a couple of resets. Typical boss strategy on Soulbound Goliath, and now only ready to head over into the hall as we see a Rad get right in there, nice and dirty on top of the Void Touched Emissary. Big pull coming in here from Raw, but Nerf just barely gets saved by JB.
Wow, that was unbelievable. But look at the damage meters. Look at Lighty just almost... Is he going to reach 1 million? No, I don't think so. I think he's already dropping off. He did manage to reach 900k DPS, so just insane pull coming out of Method NA as they pulled all of the trash on top of Rull, with also just committing their Bloodlust here. They did not pull, or they they're just avoiding the emissary there. You can see the chains of ice actually from the DK being so helpful.
Nerf's gonna go
Nerf
down.
actually going down. They do have a battle rest, so they should get him back up immediately. They have the DK, right? So Rest the Druid not available for the rest, but they have the DK instead.
Yeah, they have the DK. I mean, that's scary. You have to commit, 30 runic power on the Unholy DK just to get that res up while the rest of the trash is running around mailing you in the face. But once again, luckily for them, they had only 2 or 3 trash mobs left alive, plus the boss. So as soon as Nerf got up, he was able to taunt Rawl, have a heroic leak, reset that taunt, and grab one of the mobs, likely the Banquet Steward, that hits a bit harder than anything else in there, and just kind of stabilize the situation. So once again, almost a bit of a slip up there, just so many necrotic stacks on top of it. And Rawl is not usually a boss that you're too worried about with any affix, but necrotic can actually get kind of nasty if you don't kill those little green ooey gooey rich and chewies quickly, because they can go in and they deal insignificant melee damage, but they do stack necrotic on the tank. So the last thing you want is getting out of hand with that. Now he doesn't have stone skin available either for his dwarf Rachel for another like 50 seconds or so, but they look like they're managed to stabilize here, 23%. Right now is Depleto squad. Rather dangerous pull here. Rads just runs away, but a lot of spit debuffs. Nala goes down for Depleto squad. They do have the battle res available. Gigabob wastes no time and gets him up as Rad safely line of sights around the corner and kites the mobs with an Ursul's Vortex down to support him from Gigabob.
It's just, I just want to point out the defensive usage of Method NA here on this pull. As soon as Nerf went down, we just saw all of the damage dealers just immediately use their defensives. You saw Icebound 42 come out of Laddie, you saw the Blur, you saw Repose from Yoda, you saw the Cloak, Darkness going down. So just insanely well done by Method NA to recover this kind of pull, because as soon as the tank goes down, if you don't use any sort of defensives and it just turns around and swings, it might just straight up one-shot you. So very well done by Method NA to recover from this mistake. As they're finished off the pull, they're on 78% trash, so I believe they still need to do something here in this area before they go down to the next boss, because I believe it needs to be a little bit more than 80% to be able to get enough.
Yeah, but there is also a Void Emissary.
Oh, Emissary, is true.
Yeah, so there's a Void Emissary down here in the corner. Most teams actually completely avoid it, and they don't feel like dealing with it. It kind of cuts off half the room, and you have to deal with Lord and Lady Crest only on one half of the room, but it's really not that big of a deal. The boss doesn't require high mobility outside of when she plays the organ pipe, and then you have to kind of move around for the swirlies, but it seems like they don't care. They actually just pull everything right on top of the boss. Once again, danger will be present on the tank. He's already at 20 stacks of necrotic. He's going to have bursting on top of him, and this is a small room. Again, half the room's cut off because of that Void Emissary. So Nerf tank is finally going to use that stone form, reset it here, and the rest of the team has to kill these before it gets out of hand.
Yeah, we see it. Not a problem at all, to be honest. I mean, this is the beauty of the DK, right? This makes those kind of pulls so much easier for Method NA. Just having this huge burst AoE at the start to be able to deal with the trash fast before just completely focusing on the boss. The Depleto squad, it really seems like they're doing very similar strategies, except in this courtyard area with Silva and Goliath. Outside of that, they were doing very similar things. Right now, you can also see them pull those survivalists, which we saw Method NA pull earlier. Now, the one thing though is that they can't really do this Ral pull. I very highly doubt it, just because they don't have the DK, so they don't have this huge burst. They also don't have their Bloodlust anymore, so I very highly doubt that they will pull everything on top of Ral. So everything just goes a little bit slower for the Depleto squad. Well, Method NA having a pretty clean run. Yeah, they do have 3 deaths, but they recovered really well from them. Didn't lose a lot of time at all from those deaths, and some of them were intended as well, just because Nerf is playing this dwarf, so they just had to rest him up when everyone else was shadow melting.
Yeah, I mean, Depleto squad, you're right, is doing pretty much the exact same pulls almost mob for mob, but everything's slower. They're having to do 2 sets of pulls where Method NA did 1, etc. It's just slowly putting them further and further behind the dungeon. They're having the almost same level of spot deaths that Method NA did. They have 5 on the board versus Method NA's 2. Rad's playing a bit defensive here, starting to run off as these mobs are about to go down. Bursting starts to come up, and that means the necrotic bursting evil tank combo will occur, so you want to play it extra safe there. Method NA about to down Lord and Lady Waycrest here. In fact, the Lord Waycrest is already eating dirt on the floor. Lady Waycrest just at 0.5% once she joined the fight at 10%, so 5% left on the board for them. And now you're absolutely right, Nigger. I mean, they're 84% trash on the board. I believe you get about 8 or 9% from the Gloom Horrors in the tunnel, and then you have one more Charmer in the corner plus the Void Emissary. I don't think that's going to be enough for the remaining trash that they need, so they're likely going to do one of those we'll kill Gorak Tool, the final boss of the dungeon, and then we'll head back upstairs. But Nerf just going down at the last second on the fight here as they actually pulled the Mark Sister on top of it. They do have a battle res available, but they're opting not to use it. They feel confident that they can kill this off because Nerf will be able to release in just a moment. There he is as soon as the boss dies. So yet again, I mean, just kind of close dance with Disaster.
Yeah, they also have the staff proc from JB here. They also Yoda procking the cheat death on top of having to use the repose, and Deploy coming out of a bunch of defensives committed here. So I'm not completely sure if they planned on pulling all of these trash mobs on top of the last boss, which is something we've seen in the past, where you just gather all the Gloom Horrors and just tank it on top of the last boss, but it doesn't seem like it. So Method NA maybe not having the defensives that they want to, and just playing it a little bit safer here, just pulling them all together. Probably a Ring of Peace coming out from JB here to avoid that horror jump as well.
Yeah, Nerf popped his shield wall there and said, no problem, I can tank these 20 stacks of Necrotic. And then his health dipped to 20% in a matter of half a second. Immediately popped his Stone Skin just to make sure he has a reset there as the final last bits of Gloom Horrors trickle in. They're slowed right now. Nerf plays nice and defensive there, makes sure to get out of the way. 20 stacks of Necrotic in just a sec. They finish the last one off. Bursting's ticking on him. We do know that as soon as you're out of combat, Necrotic stacks were nerfed a while ago, and they immediately drop out of combat. They didn't used to before Season 2, I think. So you're able to heal through those bursting stacks at the very end there. Depleto squad still chewing through, still only 5 deaths on the board, but 40% on roll. They have certainly a long way to go, as 6% trash left for Method NA, and they start on Gorak Tool. So they are indeed doing a combination where they'll have to kill the boss off and then run upstairs to, I'm not really sure where, because they killed the Survivalist, or at least both of the Survivalists in that room, did they not?
Yeah, they did. I'm not. I do believe there's some trash left in this very specific room, so I assume that's what they're gonna do. But yeah, one thing I want to note about Depleto squad is that they definitely look a lot worse in this dungeon than they did in Motherlode, right? In Motherlode, they were pretty impressive, and they were really close to Method NA, really. So I was kind of impressed by their performance there, and I wanted to call them out for practicing for the first matchup, because in the past we've seen some teams that are, there's 7th or 8th seed, they would not really practice for the first matchup because you were playing the first or the second seed, so Method EU, Method NA, and they just said, you know what, we're just gonna practice for the lower bracket. We're not gonna spend any time practicing for Method EU or Method NA. So Depleted squad did practice for Motherlode, but maybe that's because they also have to play it later on in a lower bracket dungeon, and maybe they didn't spend too much time practicing Waycrest because maybe they don't have to play it anymore in the lower bracket. That definitely could be something that is causing them to slow down so much here. Maybe they just say, you know what, we're just going to pull slower, steadier, make sure we play a little bit safe. So they still have a chance of winning if Method NA does mess up one of those bigger pulls, but otherwise maybe they just didn't put too much practice in it, as they actually have a death here as well.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened there. I was watching them as you were just saying that they're having a bit of an underperformance in this dungeon. They had the mass stealth. They ran through, and then all of a sudden, Raz just got out of combat and pulled Matron Alma, and everything kind of unraveled a bit there. The rest of the group ran off and ended up using their Shadow Meld. Obviously, the tank, being a dwarf, wasn't able to do this. Aggressive pull here from Depleto squad. Doesn't pull the boss with it, looks like, as Method NA does finish off Gorak Tool and immediately heads upstairs. It does seem actually that they had a few more Survivalist / Mastiff combos here, and it should be their remaining 6%. Now, we've seen Method NA have disaster in this exact same room before. I'm sure they have it under control this time, though.
Yeah, I hope so. This last stretch, of course, that they need to get the 100%. And interesting to see that they actually go back to this strategy. This is something we've seen at the very, very start of the spring season, and then people just went away from this strat and made sure they had the 100% trash without having to go backwards. But Method NA going back, repeating this strategy, and it's working out for them as they win the first game against the Depleto squad 2-0.
We do take that series 2-0. Method NA pulling out the Meme Weaver action. It was really cool to start seeing it on that one, Zyronic, and it was played incredibly well against some nasty, nasty affixes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see JB actually finally bring out something other than Arrested Druid. And I was curious to see whether or not he would actually end up pulling it out at some point this week, because I remember after the first West Cup 2 weeks ago, he said Mistweaver is the best healer spec to play in Dungeons right now. You're just kind of corralled into playing Arrested Druid because of the battle res. That being said, they make the Mistweaver work because they end up bringing the DK. And having the DK also allows you to bring the Demon Hunter to buff the DK's damage even further. I think this comp is probably one of the more well-rounded comps that we can see out of anything in MDI, because you bring the AP buff, you bring both the physical and magic debuff, and you really allow both the Rogue and the Unholy DK to pop off in terms of utility. This comp is awesome. I love this comp from them.
You're also not sacrificing too terribly much in the process. You're going to be able to still have any of the truths you see in Imprisoned from the Demon Hunter as well. You're still keeping an AoE stun, for example. The grip utility came in handy a number of times. And, of course, we saw Way of the Crane coming in conjunction with Ring of Peace. How these things start working together was very cool to see. And the only thing that I wasn't too big of a fan of was running with Well of Existence as the minor trait. rate on this one. In general, I think it works very well, but against Necrotic, I saw a number of times. We saw, for example, with Nerf dying when he had, 30, 40 stacks in the courtyard there, the entire well just gets dumped into the tank and does no healing. So if you're going to be running with something like more offensively with Crucible, like you have to run Lucid Dreams if you're running with a new Ashara staff to make sure that you're keeping your mana healthy enough to not randomly proc it halfway through. But if you're going to run more aggressive with like Crucible Miner or even Vitality Conduit Miner, I'm not sure if you've run with that one, Nagura, but the equalization of those health pools in particular helps out a lot when you're going up against Necrotic because it's a proc-based system rather than trying to fill up your well and then you dump it all into the tank who has high Necrotic.
Unfortunately, I do not play Mistweaver at all, so I have no idea what you just said.
It was a
But
healer
it seemed right. It seemed right, so I'll agree with you.
She hasn't unlocked essences yet.
That must have been the case.
I thought you were tossing that to me. I know nothing about healing.
I know that. And I was like, I saw her doing dungeons.
Jack's having a moment, guys. Be supportive. This is the one time he gets to talk about
Mistweaver,
something other than a resto druid.
Just
For the
wait until
healer
you see the
essences.
disc priest.
I know. Just you wait under that one.
We'll be waiting a long time.
We will. We might. We'll see. But Method NA is going to be moving on into the upper semis and awaiting the winner between our next series coming up, Abracadabra and 40K.